We're digging through Sri Nisargadatta's Maharaj's I Am That, and we are on, let me see, the section 42, Reality Cannot Be Expressed. And the conversation's going in the direction of these two selves that we have inside. You know, like the Upanishads talk about the two birds in the tree. There's the enlightened bird, and then there's the active bird. There's living in the mind as the thought of yourself, where you place the thoughts of yourself amongst all the other constantly changing thoughts, and that's the universe. That's the world you live in. It's right in here, and you place your identity in there by thinking of yourself as a thought. And we do that, you know, we're doing that because we see ourselves from the outside in. If we were being ourselves, we would describe ourselves from the inside out, which we don't. We always describe ourselves from the inside out. And if somebody asks, who are you? You start describing yourself from the outside in, right? And somebody asks you who you are, and you start telling them, you start listing your attachments and aversions. You know, it's quite funny. So this is really how we see the delusion, how we recognize our delusion, that we always describe ourselves from the outside in, even though we've never seen ourselves from the outside in. And we describe ourselves by our attachments and our aversions. That's how you know we're attached. And that's how you know that we're identified with them, because when we write our dating app, we just put down a nice long list of attractions and aversions and say, that's who I am and that's what I'm looking for, right? So these two selves coexist within us. We have the absolute unchanging blissful self, which is the bird at the top of the tree that rests nice and quietly. She, that bird is content always, at peace always, enjoying the visuals always. The other bird is frantically looking around for what it needs. I need this. I have to go get that. I have to find this. I have to become this. I have to do this. And that bird is frantically running around all over the place. And so these two selves are living in there. And the questioner will go back a question or two. He says, one of these selves is a slave to habits. The other is not. One conceptualizes. The other is free from all ideas. And Maharaj says, why two selves? Why do you think that that's two beings, right? Between the bound and the free, there can be no relationship. The very fact of coexistence proves their basic unity. There is but one self. It is always now. What you call the other self, the old or the new, this seems like all new material to me. Right? So what you call the other self, the old or the new, is but a modality, another aspect of the one self. The self is single. You are that self, and you have ideas of what you have been or will be. But an idea is not the self. That is very important, because that's how we break into multiple people, right? We're lucky if we've only got two people. Most of us take this active side, this deluded bird, and we have like 12 different personalities we can put on, you know, one when I go to church, and one when I go to the office, and one when I'm hanging out with the card group at the old folks home, and one when I'm hanging out with family. You know, we become all different kinds of people, and all of them seem real. And so he's really bringing the focus back. Remember that you are only one person with many modalities, perhaps. The ideal is to have one person, and I would think one modality. I think sincerity would really demand that you have one one way of being. That's what I saw in Swami Prabhupada. Actually, it's one of the most amazing things, is that he just had one self. He would never had a mood. You never had to wonder, you know, how to approach him. I mean, he was just always exactly the same person. He didn't have these different moods and mindsets about himself. So an idea is not the self. And this is very important, especially when you're living as the thought of yourself. That's what makes this world seem so real. That's what makes your troubles seem so real. all of your troubles are only arrangements of thought. I know it's infuriating to say, but it's the truth of it. All of your troubles are just arrangements of thought. And so if you keep in mind that fact, hey, this is just a thought, that means it's malleable. I don't have to think this way. I don't have to have this set of priorities. I don't have to have this perspective, and that's one thing as I grow in spirituality, at least I assume that's what's happening. I do find that you can change the mood with a thought. I used to think moods had to be endured until they were finished because I thought they were real. And I'm coming to a point in my life where I'm discovering quite beautifully and quite astoundingly, actually, because I can't believe how much needless suffering I've put myself through by believing that I had to endure states of mind, that I had to endure ideas, that I would I would get into a certain idea of my circumstance and I would be upset, Like this morning when it was time to get up, I rolled over and the first thought was like, oh God, there's so much to do. I don't want to get up. And that left a residue that was like, ick, who wants to wake up with that attitude? But I caught it. I saw it. I was like, God, what kind of way to use the mind is that? Stop. That's ridiculous. There are so many things. Look out the window, for crying out loud. This is an amazingly beautiful day out there, and you're in an amazingly beautiful place. How can you focus on just having to do a few chores and then decide you don't want to get up? That's a terrible thing. And so really using the skills that mothers taught all of us over all these years, I just reframed, just put my mind on that and woke up and decided to approach the day as a beautiful day with an infinite potential instead of thinking about how am I going to find the weed eater in the crawl space under the pavilion. Although I do wonder that still. He says the two are in conflict. So when you have these two selves, when you believe them to be two selves, when you don't remember that you are a singularity, that's the union of both that active self and that contented self, you have to always understand you're beyond both of those. But the two of them are in conflict because the satisfied self is always content. It just wants to be content. It wants to come from and live an inspired life of Satchitananda. The other one is desperately looking for something, desperately trying to find whatever it is that makes it think it's out of balance. And the reason it's always thinking it's out of balance is because it's in here and it consists only of thoughts that have been collected around it. And those thoughts are always shifting and changing. So there's never a stability. There's never a cohesion to it. It's got moods and conditions that are constantly changing that it's always having to react to and always having to try some method of stabilizing. And a lot of us, in our spiritual life are still trying to stabilize the thought of us. And it can't be done. And the tough part about that is we stay localized there as the thought of ourselves, and we collect these failures as our own failures. And we start to say things like, oh, I can't meditate. Oh, I'm good. It's going to be so many lifetimes before I realize God. And we get discouraged about all that because we've forgotten the silent self, the component that's sitting in there that's just chilling, just watching everything happen, and seeing the world as it is. We forget that. And so what we're really trying to do is to let go of this deluded self, not to live as the thought of ourself in the world of thoughts, but to understand that we're outside of that and become the observer of the world of thoughts. And then then you come to know that there's an uncrossable gap between the world of thought and the contented self, the santosha, the supremely contented self within there. And that expanse, that uncrossable expanse, that's our refuge in God. That's our refuge from the material world. So these two selves are in conflict. They're the peaceful one's not in conflict. He just kind of hangs out. But the other one, running all over the place, can't understand that. How can you be content? Do something. Get up. So Maharaj, so the questioner is saying they're in conflict. I was reading that as Maharaj. That's the questioner. The two are in conflict. And Maharaj says, how can there be conflict between what is and what is not? Right? If you've got two selves in there, that's an imagined self. And if you've identified yourself with one of the nodes, one of the two nodes of self, then it appears as conflict. But he's saying this doesn't resolve by those two becoming one. This resolves by retreating from the one that's active and resting and seeing that they are derivative, that they are of this grander self. So how can there be a conflict between what is and what is not? Because the what is not is the world of thought, the world of constant, unrepeating change. Conflict is the characteristic of the old, right? Conflict is when we have an ego that's based entirely on the past and it's being continually confronted with new or present material that it has to deal with. So he's saying the conflict is the characteristic of the old, of that ego self. The ego is always in conflict for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't really exist, and yet you as a personality desperately need it to exist, right? Because the ego is your safety zone. It's your floaties. When you're a kid, you get in the pool and you put those floaties up on your arm. Those floaties are your ego, right? They create a wall around you of delusion that says, I'm in charge. Everything on this side of my white picket fence is mine. I get to express myself here. I'll make the decisions. I'll do the doing. I'll make the happening. I'll do the planning, all of that. Even though none of that is real, right? And is constantly in flux, constantly changing, we maintain that idea. The mind constantly adjusts reality to support this idea of yourself. And that's why this whole universe has formed around you to try and, because you are that, you're God and you've decided I'm going to be just this body mind, then the whole universe has to reorganize around you to support the idea of you being a body mind. And that's the universe you live in, the universe of karma, the universe of duality, of all of these pairs of opposites, right? And so the conflict belongs to the ego self, to the old. He calls it the old because the ego is entirely constructed on past memories, attachments, aversions, all of that. So how can there be conflict between what is real, the self in the moment that's always present, and what is not, the thought of the self that's in the world of constant change? He says conflict is the characteristic of the old, of the ego, because it's based on something that can't change anymore, right? The past. It's based on that. So it's constantly having to juggle the changes to assimilate it into this wrong idea of itself based on memory, right? And so he says when the new emerges, the old is no longer, right? The old is obviously the past. It's set in the memory. The new is the one present, which is oh gosh, it's the one it's the divine light within you. One of the descriptions that I was very excited about that came to me last week was that you are a stationary light of awareness, a light of pure love. And that's all you do. You just sit there and illumine in your true self. Time is like a film strip that runs through you, just like the film running through the front of the light in a projecting camera. You are the light, and time is the film strip that just drags all of this change through you, right? And as long as you stay firm in the knowledge that you are the light, everything's good, everything's fine, there's no problem. As soon as you think you're the story on the film strip that's going through your light, that's when you struggle, right? That's when you're set up as a person with conditions, with aversions and attractions, right? And it's all based on the past, as we've been talking. Why? Because the film strip has gone through, and so only what has already gone through has defined you as a person. So your sense of self is based on the film strip of time that has already gone through you. It's not yet based on what's coming there, right? But even in all of that, no matter what delusion you're experiencing by watching the video and believing that film strip to be you, the reality of it is, I am just a light of divine awareness, the light of love, the light of Satchitananda. And I am shining through the film strip of time onto the screen of the mind. So he says, when the new emerges, the old is no longer. It's changed, right? As soon as there's new that's been integrated, the old is no longer the same. It's changed. The memories have changed. They've been added to. We in some sense, we could have the illusion of growing, changing, transcending as we do, and that's where that comes from. But in fact, we don't grow and transcend. We just slowly approach the real, right? The all-knowing, ever-present, contented self. So we don't actually change. We don't actually grow. We actually just basically slough off ignorance as the film strip goes through us and come to an understanding of our nature in that. So when the new emerges, the old is no longer. You cannot speak of the new and the conflict in the same breath, right? Because the new is the present. There's nothing to conflict with. Nothing else exists. There is only now. It's not until you tie it into the old that there becomes something to argue with, that there becomes something to wrestle with. In the moment, there's just isness, as it is, and it's taken as it is, right? But when you identify in your ego state, you have to process everything, because you are insisting on being the unchanging in a constantly changing existence. And so that's why it doesn't work. You cannot speak of the new and the conflict in the same breath. Even the effort of striving for the new self is of the old. Why? Because it's part of a story. It's part of a narrative. It's not in the now. It's borrowing the story that creates the need for striving, right? So you've run a story, a film strip has run through your light that talks of striving, of something missing that needs to be fixed or achieved or done. And so it makes you put forth an effort, an effort to manifest. And so that's why he says there, even the effort of striving for the new self is of the old. Wherever there is conflict, wherever there is effort, wherever there is struggle, striving, longing for a change, the new is not. You can know at that point that you are in the past and running a narrative of delusion, right? So anytime any of those things are going on for you right there, you can know. Anytime there's conflict, effort, struggle, striving, longing for a change, the new is not. To what extent are you free from the habitual tendency to create and perpetuate conflicts? That's the question. That's the measure of spiritual life right there, actually. That's the same question as, are you loving and are you unselfish? Vivekananda says those are the only two questions to ask yourself when you're wondering how spiritual you are. Excuse me. I'm being 60 years old for just a minute here. So to what extent are you free from the habitual tendency? Because that's all it is habitual thinking, right? Modes of thinking, circular ideas that run around in your head that get you caught up in an idea of yourself. He says, to what extent are you free from this habitual tendency to create and perpetuate conflict or story, right? That's one of the first things you learn about writing a story in school. What's the conflict, right? What's the central conflict of your novel? And you have to come up with your problem. Well, that's life. That's egoism. That's exactly what we do there. We can't be problem free. We've got to go create one. And if we don't create one, then one comes to us, because the new is always different from the old. And the old has to keep adjusting. As long as you identify with that old, you have to keep struggling and striving and fixing and turning and changing, right? But it's not a necessary process. You just have to stop believing that's you and believe that this consented self, the silent self within, is you. Identify with your silence and not with your noise. That's all that it takes, he says. To what extent are you free from the habitual tendency to create and perpetuate conflict? Questioner: I cannot say that I am now a different man, but I did discover new things about myself, states so unlike what I knew before that I feel justified in calling them new. Right? So you can see it's very interesting, because you can see he just gave a demonstration of exactly what Maharaj had said in the paragraph before. I cannot say that I'm now a different man, because you can never be a different man or a different person. You are always the light, right? You are always that light. The thing that's different is the film strip. The thing that's different is the memories and thoughts going on. But I do discover new things about myself, you see, but that's only when you've collected a static self that you can look at, right? Oddly enough, because if he's even talking about it in third person, he says, to discover new things about myself. That means that he has identified with a self that he can look at, that he can objectify, right, and define. So that should be a gigantic clue. Wait a minute. I can't objectify myself. I can't put myself in front of me. I can put stories in front of me. I can put memories in front of me, but I can't put the self in front of me. I actually can't know myself as I am, right? Because that won't fit in the mind. That's undefined. That's something beyond the tools of mind to capture. But I did discover new things about myself, states so unlike what I knew before, right? So he's, again, knowing before, that's your ego. That's your ego self. Your ego knows something before, and it's being confronted with new states of mind that it has to deal with, has to conflict with, or it has to absorb, or it has to come into harmony with. States so unlike what I knew before that I feel justified in calling them new, right? Calling them new, but they're only new when they're held in contrast to your old, to yourself, right? Otherwise, they just are. So this moment is not new. This moment is, and it's constant. And you are the one unchanging thing in the moment. You are the light of awareness through which all of this is passing, right? And so all that you have to do is to not do, right? Stop stepping in to the story and trying to change it and trying to adjust it and trying to improve it and trying to create it. Stay uninterested. Stay the observer, and be interested in the inspiration of that moment of being. Maharaj, the old self is your own self. The state which sprouts suddenly and without cause carries no stain of self. You may call it God. What is seedless and rootless, what does not sprout and grow, flower and fruit, what comes into being suddenly and in full glory, mysteriously and marvelously, you may call that God. It is entirely unexpected, yet inevitable, infinitely familiar, yet most surprising, beyond all hope, yet absolutely certain. Because it is without cause, it is without hindrance, it obeys only one law, the law of freedom. Anything that implies a continuity, a sequence, a passing from stage to stage cannot be the real. There is no progress in reality. It is final, it is perfect, it is unrelated. All right? So he's got those, he's showing us telling us about those two sides, right? This old self is the little s, the old is the little s self, the egoistic self, right? The self trapped in Shakti, as it were, is there. And from that perspective, we look at this state, which, I guess at some level it's a state, but a temporary state, which sprouts suddenly, which means it's spontaneous. There's not a cause to it. It's got no cause. It says without cause. It carries no stain of self, the little s self. No point in a story. It's its own thing. It is only now, right? So it contains no stain of ego. We can call that God. All right. So as long as we're ego self, as long as we see ourself as the changing, and deal with our life as the thought of ourself within a world of thought. Anything that's not that, anything that is spontaneous and new and perfectly of the present, we call that God. That's what God is. What is seedless and rootless, right? So seedless, meaning that it's never born and it never dies. So, and it doesn't change. So there is no seed, right? Which is seedless and rootless, needing nothing. It doesn't need to take in anything. It's simply, it's content and full and complete in and of itself. What does not sprout, right? What is not born, what does not grow, right? So it's not in time. It's not going through the constant change of time, which is from the mind. It does not flower, right? So there is no reproduction. There's no begging for progeny. There's no thought of continuity or projecting into the future. And it does not fruit, right? Because it is not born, and because it does not die, and because it always is, because it's out of time, it doesn't fruit. What comes into being suddenly, meaning spontaneously without a cause, and in full glory, which means complete and perfect. That's why we say that God is everywhere present and always perfect, right? He comes into being suddenly and in full glory, mysteriously, because we have no idea what this moment is. We have no idea what we're experiencing. And truly, we have no idea, right? We've described the senses ad infinitum. We've created multiple sciences based on what the senses are experiencing. And yet, are we any closer to actually having a practical knowledge of what is this? What is going on? Mysteriously and marvelously, which is one of the delightful things about the moment, is if you come into the moment detached, even a horrible moment, a moment that the body mind would define as horrible, can still be marvelous in that it presents an infinite mystery. It presents an infinite puzzle, an infinite complexity, and yet without any complexity, because it doesn't actually it doesn't actually exist. It's marvelous. It's like your movie. You go to a movie and it's great. You would really thoroughly enjoy it. But what did you actually do? You got nothing accomplished. You sat in a chair for 2 hours and ate popcorn. That's what you accomplished by watching that movie. Even though in the movie you may have gone anywhere and done anything, there's no limit to what you could have been doing in the movie. But the reality is you just watched it. And see, this is the reality of our life, right? We just watched it. But it's not like we're just a dark blob of nothing watching a movie. We're the light that allowed the movie to happen. We're the love that expressed the story, right? All of that. So mysteriously and marvelously, you may call that God. It is entirely unexpected, right? You never know what's coming. You can have ideas about what's coming, but that doesn't mean that it's going to obey those ideas of what's coming, right? You're driving to the grocery store. You think you know what's coming, the grocery store. And then wham, a bus takes off the front end of your car. And you're like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to the grocery store anymore. What are we doing? I have no idea. Where's my insurance and registration? right? We just go on. So it's entirely unexpected and yet inevitable. you can't, you can't yell out of the shower, I'll be there in a minute. It's coming. There's no stopping it. Infinitely familiar, right? Because it's emanating from your own divine self. It's always familiar, and yet most surprising. It's always a mixture of, because it's meeting the old. If it just met the old and it was exactly the same, it would just absorb and there'd be no shuffling, right? But it comes into the old and it's changed, it's different, it's new. It's what am I going to do with that piece of information? Beyond all hope and yet absolutely certain, right? So beyond all hope means hope doesn't make any difference. You can have hope or not. It's not going to change what's coming. But absolutely certain, which means it's coming. Whatever it is, can't be determined. It's not going to be a product of hope, but it will be something, anything. Absolutely certain. Because it is without a cause, it is without hindrance. So if nothing has caused it, there's no hindrance, which means it's not going to be a cause of something else, right? It's not within that storyline. It's spontaneous in the moment, fresh and new. It's unhindered. It's not controlled by the story. So it doesn't have to take on the attributes to keep the story going. So that's what the hindrance is. The hindrance is attributes that the story would place on it if it had a cause. If it had a cause, that means it's in story, right? Something made it happen. And if it was made to happen, then it will make something else happen. So it's in that endless thing. But he says that it's not a cause. It didn't have a cause, and therefore it also cannot be forced to cause. It cannot have attributes put on it that will be changed. It obeys one law only, the law of freedom. Right? And what is freedom? Yeah, this is the very heart of delusion. Freedom is to have no desire, right? So freedom is to know your fullness, to know your contentedness. That is its only law. Perfection. This is perfect. Right? Anything that implies a continuity, a sequence, a passing from stage to stage, cannot be real. That's what we call the narrative. Right? The story of your life cannot be real. Cannot be real because it's not there. All that's left is the residue of ideas from the passing of time. The film strip went through the mind, the light shone through it, it reflected off the mind, and you collected it as a memory. And that memory became your story, became your narrative. That memory doesn't exist. It's not real. And yet your story to you, because you're attached to it, because you identify with it, is very real. But it's still only a thought, only a story. And there's infinite power in knowing that. Right? There is no progress in reality because there's nowhere to go. Progress suggests improvement. You can't improve on perfect. It is final, perfect, and unrelated. Unrelated is the way of saying one without a second. Right? There's nothing that it's related to. It's not beautiful because something else is ugly. It's not loving because something else is hating. None of the dualities. It is as it is, and by definition, it is perfect. It is free. So the questioner likes this. He says, well, how can I bring that about? Right? Maharaj, you can do nothing to bring it about. Right? So much for your practice. You can do nothing to bring it about, but you can avoid creating obstacles. Oops, welcome back to your practice. Right? So you can't bring it about. You can't do anything to make it happen. Why? Because it already is. right? You're just observing. You can avoid creating obstacles. You can avoid identifying with particulars. That's how we create obstacles, identifying with particulars. And you can avoid that. Watch your mind, how it comes into being, how it operates. Right? This is the work to be done. The first part is just going through that process we've been talking about, working on identifying and making sure that you know the body is separate from you. Go inside and watch until it's apparent to you that the body is separate. And then the same thing with mind. Observe until you know and can fully see that I'm watching the mind. And then begin to know how it works together. You can feel that identity happen. Boy, identity is not a great feeling. It's a weird feeling, right? It's a controlling feeling. It's like you lose your freedom when you attach to an idea and it starts making you feel the need for an action. You can feel that disturbance. So through our practice, we have to come to that subtle space of seeing so we can feel those things as they happen and let go, not let them drag us in. Because once you get dragged in, there's a lot of things to let go of, and then it becomes more difficult. So as you watch your mind, you discover yourself as the watcher. When you stand motionless, only watching, you discover yourself as the light behind the watcher. Yes, we're coming full circle here. Only watching, you discover yourself as the light behind the watcher. The source of light is dark. Unknown is the source of knowledge. That source alone is, right? And it can't be known because it cannot be caught. It cannot be defined. It cannot be limited. It cannot be constricted. It cannot be positioned in front of something else. It is its own freedom. Unknown is the source of knowledge. The source alone is. Go back to that source and abide there, which means identify with that silence. Identify with that observation, with that watching self. Don't identify with the thought self, the thought of yourself. It is not in the sky nor in the all-pervading ether, right? Because all of those things can be observed. God is all that is great and wonderful. I am nothing. I have nothing. I can do nothing. Because you're just an idea of self. You are not being the self when you are manipulating the change, when you're living in the thought of self. You're in the dream. And when you're in the dream, you have all kinds of delusions about being able to travel, do anything you want in that dream. But what did you actually do? Nothing. You slept. You slept. That's what you accomplished. So that source alone is, go back to that source, the source of the light, right? And be that and abide there. It is not in the sky nor in the all-pervading ether. God is all that is great and wonderful. I am nothing, have nothing, can do nothing. Yet all comes out of me. The source is me. The root, the origin is me, right? And that's the same me for all of us. That light is singular, and all of us are that same light. All of us are the same origin. When reality explodes in you, you may call it experience of God, or rather, it is God experiencing you. You see that? What he just did to you? He says, flip the way you think. This world is not you experiencing God. This world is God experiencing you. That's why I say how intimate God is. We feel like in prayer, initially, we have to tell God how we feel. We have to describe everything. And then the second stage of prayer is that we realize we don't really have to, we speak in half sentences then. And then it comes to a silence where all we have to do is make ourselves available, right? But all of that is still happening with us thinking that we're experiencing God. The real intimacy happens is when it dawns on you that you are God experiencing your personality. You are God experiencing Satchitananda pushed through this form, this prism of mind, this prism of body. So you are this beautiful light being pushed through a prism of this mind, right? And coming out from the front of this body as this creature, this aging, I was just going to go into a string of fun things there, this aging, balding old man. And God is experiencing you. God is experiencing that, right? That experience, right? You are not experiencing God. And so that flip is going to happen at some point. You're going to be in there experiencing God, and all of a sudden you're going to get so close that you're like, whoa, 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 there's no me. God is experiencing a story of a thing called me, but that it is not real. It's a movie. When reality explodes in you, you may call it experience of God, or rather, it is God experiencing you. God knows when you know yourself. Reality is not the result of a process. It is an explosion. It is definitely beyond the mind, but all you can do is to know your mind well. Not that the mind will help you, but by knowing your mind, you may avoid your mind disabling you, telling you stories of restriction, telling you stories of of imbalance, of disharmony. Not that the mind will help you, but by knowing your mind, you may avoid your mind disabling you. You have to be very alert, or else your mind will play false with you. It is like watching a thief. Not that you expect anything from a thief, but you do not want to be robbed. In the same way, you give a lot of attention to the mind without expecting anything from it. Right? That's an interesting point there. In the same way, you give a lot of attention to the mind. That's what we're needing to do. Because I tell you, the mind is conniving all the time. It is always trying to collect the needs of the body and its own imagined needs. And if it wants and is convinced that it wants those things, it will try and get them at any cost. And you'll be struggling horribly in the midst of that. So you watch it, and you watch it carefully like a thief, right? You don't ever completely take your attention off of it. Imagine working in a department store and there's a known shoplifter shopping around in there, but you're at the register helping someone else, but you're going to have at least part of an eye on that person the whole time, watching them go around that store. Okay, they're going, oh, look, they're going out of sight. That's when it happens, right? And so we have to watch our mind like that. Watch everything about it. Like watching a thief. Not that you expect anything from a thief, but you don't want to be robbed. So expecting something, that means that you're not doing this to get something in particular. You're doing this for freedom's sake, for its own sake, so that you're not limited. You're not penned in by your thoughts circling the wagons around you with a narrative that gets you caught, makes you small, makes you subject to everything else. Anything we've done. In the same way, you give a lot of attention to the mind without expecting anything from it, because expectation is need, right? That which is watching the mind, which is observing the mind, trying to extricate its confusion with the mind out from that relationship, that self has no expectation. It's perfect. It's content. It's stable. It's harmonious. It always does the right thing. It never has to contemplate the right thing. Or take another example. We wake and we sleep. After a day's work, sleep comes. Now, do I go to sleep, or does inadvertence, characteristic of the sleeping state, come to me? Right? So do I go to sleep, or does sleep go to me? That's an interesting thing. In other words, we are awake because we are asleep. You understand? That the self, the witness, is still in the same state, as it were, regardless of whether the body mind is awake or asleep. It is still just aware, right? That's how you know you had a good night's sleep, because there's a you that never sleeps. There's a you that's always aware. It's aware of the conditions of the mind always. So if the mind is dreaming, it's aware that it's dreaming. It's not sleeping. This awareness is just present in the same way that it is in your waking state. It's always there. It never changes. It is the unchanging you, right? In other words, we are awake because we are asleep. We do not wake up into a really waking state. In the waking state, the world emerges due to ignorance and takes one into a waking dream state. There it is. In the waking state, the world emerges due to ignorance and takes one into a waking dream state, because you're still not awake. You're still in the narrative. You're still believing yourself to be awake, or to be asleep, or to be dreaming, or to not be dreaming but deep into sleep, you know. So as long as you think that you're any of those doings, that is not the thing. You have not changed through all of that. You can use this to kind of get an idea. If we want another idea, I don't know. But you can certainly use these things to get a good experience of their truth, right? Because this is kind of obvious that you're still awake even when you're sleeping, because you're observing the dream, acting in the dream. So your awareness is there. And that awareness that is you in the dream is the same awareness that is you in the waking state. They're not different. And that's the biggest clue of all to know that you are not the body or the mind, is because this you that can dream and the you that can be awake and the you that can be in deep sleep is the same you. So just by observing that, you're going to learn about your nature. You're going to learn about the reality. And so this is why we want to become so intimately aware of body-mind from the observer within. So in the waking state, the world emerges due to ignorance and takes one into a waking dream state. And again, I'm not going to go into it, but you remember we talked about how we know it is kind of the same state. It's just slightly different because we're still not observing an external world. We don't have the possibility of observing an external world, because the ultimate truth is that there is no external world, right? And so we can't observe an external world. We can only observe the symbols that our mind has created from the senses and blame it on the external world, on an imagined external world. That's all we can do. That's all we're doing right now, right? Just like all of us are simply staring at a computer screen right now. We're not looking at people, right? We're just looking at dots, literally looking at dots on a screen. Everything else is ego creating a story. Everything else is ego creating a story. Both sleep and waking are misnomers. We are only dreaming, right? So same point. We are always in a dream state. We are always watching the mind present itself as a universe and using a universe of symbols to tell us about something, or to manifest something. But that thing, and it's manifesting, the manifestation is not the thing itself, right? It's just the emanation of a continually rising body heat, as it were. So both sleep and waking are misnomers. We are only dreaming. True waking and true sleeping, only the Jnani knows. We dream that we are awake. We dream that we are asleep. The three states are only varieties of the dream state. Treating everything as a dream liberates. As long as you give reality to dreams, you are their slave. You see, think that we've contemplated that difference quite a bit. There's a huge difference between dreaming and not knowing that you're dreaming, because then you're subject to all the fears, conflicts, strangeness, and things that the narrative of the dream bring to you. But have that exact same dream with the knowledge that you're dreaming. And suddenly nothing is fearful. Everything is very interesting. Everything's very intriguing, even rather fun. Because as you dream, knowing that you're dreaming, you are aware of the fact that you cannot be harmed. You are aware of the fact that the story does not apply to you, that you're merely observing it. Right? So both sleep and waking are misnomers. We are only dreaming. True waking and true sleeping, only the Jnani knows. We dream that we are awake and we dream that we are asleep. The three states are only varieties of that dream state. Treating everything as a dream liberates. So knowing it to be unreal. As long as you give reality to the dreams, as long as you think they're real and that you're in them, you are their slave, right? Meaning that the dream creates the conditions and circumstances, and you react, right? And isn't that what life does? Life brings you stuff that you don't know is coming, and you just continually react, continually react, continually react. That's how you know that you're not the doer. You're not in charge, right? You're not creating the future. You're reacting to the present, right? And that continues your story, which produces a future, the idea of a future anyway. But really all you're doing is reacting to the present. So as long as you give reality to dreams, you are their slave. By imagining that you are born as so-and-so, you become a slave to the so-and-so. The essence, right? And that's what he's talking about here is by imagining you are born as so-and-so. That is creating a thought of self and placing that thought to self amongst all the other thoughts in your mind and letting it run its course. Right? By imagining that you're born as so-and-so, you become a slave of the so-and-so. You become a slave of the idea of who you are. And you're forced to act in harmony with the idea of who you are, right? And the more that goes on unobserved, the more permanent it becomes, right? So you become that cantankerous old person that never gets your way. You hate kids because they're an unknown source of constant change, right? All right, so by imagining that you are born as so-and-so, you become a slave to the so-and-so. The essence of slavery is to imagine yourself to be a process, to have a past and a future, to have history. In fact, we have no history. We are not a process. We do not develop. We do not decay. Also, see all as a dream and stay out of it. Understand, this is all just a dream. Play with it. You know, that's another way of staying out of it. You don't take it seriously because you know it to be unreal, but you play your part. Knowing who you are is the best way. I am Satchitananda, right? Which is not a particular, it's a principle that is applied everywhere in this dream. And so once you know that principle about yourself, have no other thought. Just emanate that divine principle, love, wisdom through being. That's all. See all as a dream and stay out of it. Questioner, what benefit do I derive from listening to you then, right? Because this is a dream. You're unreal. What benefit am I getting then by sitting here and listening to this? Maharaj, well, what's the benefit? It's this. I'm calling you back to yourself. All I ask you is to look at yourself, toward yourself, into yourself. Right? I'm the one who has appeared in your dream and told you that you're sleeping. That's my only benefit. I'm not actually giving you anything or changing anything. I'm just here and I'm just saying, hey, dude, You're dreaming. This isn't real. Wake up. You know, basically, I would tell you the exact same thing that all the avatars have told you. I would tell you the same things Jesus is telling you. I would tell you the same things that Ramakrishna is telling you. I would tell you the same things that Rama told you and Buddha told you. Right? All those same things are just trying to get you to take your eyes off of the changing and find the unchanging within yourself and be that. Allow that to be. That is its own isness. So that's all that we have to do. All right. So we'll stop there for this morning because time has passed.